Wow, we are already a quarter of the way through this thing, which seems really weird for me to say because it feels like just yesterday that I started this whole series. Hey guys, welcome to my Road to Avengers Endgame series where I review every single MCU movie leading up to Avengers Endgame, and I am now on number 5, the 5th movie in the series out of what's going to be 21 by the time I'm done, Captain America: The First Avenger, which came out in 2011 and stars Chris Evans as Captain America, Steve Rogers, who is this guy who has always been trying to help people. That's the only thing he's ever wanted to do, is serve his country so that he can protect people and help people. But the problem is he can't do it because he's too skinny, he's too small, he's got all kinds of health problems, and because of this, the army won't let him in. He tries all kinds of different army sites to get in and uses different fake names and lies every time, but they always find a way to deny him, which is understandable because someone that's that skinny, small, and has all those kinds of health problems, it can be very problematic to have out there in the field fighting. So definitely makes sense that they would do this, but he keeps on pushing, keeps trying to find a way. And eventually he comes across this doctor who tells him, you know what, I think I got an idea for you. I think we can make this work. And he puts him in, he gets him in, and Steve Rogers gets chosen for this project where they inject super serum into him, and it kind of turns him into this super soldier who has crazy abilities that most other humans wouldn't. He becomes this really muscular guy who is crazy fast, crazy strong, crazy agile, and kind of becomes their secret weapon in the war against the Nazis in World War II. So starting off with the positives, and I feel like this is something I'm always going to bring up right away for pretty much every MCU movie because they always manage to nail it, and that is the cast. Starting off with Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Captain America, the main character. This seemed like kind of an odd choice at first because, like many people, my experience with Chris Evans was Johnny Storm in the old Fantastic Four movies, which, by the way, I don't hate nearly as much as most people do, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, Johnny Storm and Steve Rogers are basically on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Johnny Storm is a guy who's crazy, free-living, loves life, always around girls, always getting drunk and partying and sleeping around and just having a carefree life. And you got Steve Rogers, who is a guy who has morals, and that is his main thing. He cares about everyone, he cares about people, and is always trying to do the right thing and always puts others above his own needs. So these two characters are both superheroes, but they're on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So at first, when this casting happened, people understandably were like, ooh, I don't know about this. This doesn't seem like the right fit here. As soon as I saw the movie, I knew that they got it right. Chris Evans as Captain America is basically what Downey is to Iron Man. You can't imagine anyone else doing it. He's perfect in the role. And Marvel nailed it again with their casting. Shouldn't have doubted them in the first place. Chris Evans, he has the physical attributes of Captain America. He's in very good shape. He's strong. And he also he has a really good job with the kind of more righteousness of him. So, perfect portrayal of the character there. Then you go to the side characters, and you got Haley Atwell as Agent Peggy Carter. You got Tommy Lee Jones as the Colonel. Toby Jones as Zola. Hugo Weaving as Red Skull, and Sebastian Stan as Bucky. Perfect casting. This is a great ensemble of people, even though Steve Rogers is definitely the main character. You even got Stanley Tucci as the Doctor, who's not in it for that much, but does a really good job in the few scenes that he's in this movie. So casting, right on. Acting, portrayals, right on. But the main appeal of this movie is the main character, Steve Rogers, Captain America, and what makes him so interesting to everyone and makes everyone latch onto him is he's a very relatable character. He's a guy who is always looking to do the right thing and always trying to help everyone, is just trying to find the best way to do that, but because of his physical limitations, he is unable to. So he goes through this procedure that allows him to help people. He's kind of lost when it comes to talking to women. He has some interesting relationships with friends, and he cares about a lot of people, and he really values his friendships and relationships. And this movie does a really good job portraying that. All of his different, he's got the relationship with Bucky, his best friend growing up, and he's got the kind of ongoing relationship, or kind of new coming relationship with Peggy Carter, who he meets when he enters the army, and they kind of grow fond of each other, and he doesn't know how to interact with her and doesn't really know how to do this whole thing, and she kind of helps him out along the way, which leads me to Peggy Carter, who is absolutely awesome. She's a great character. I wish we would have gotten to see more of her in the MCU, but I understand why we don't, because this movie takes place during World War II. Then at the end of the movie, it's not. So she's really old and basically almost dead by the time that Captain America gets unfrozen. So it's really too bad the way that had to happen, but it also makes a lot of sense for storytelling, because Captain America wouldn't be the character that he is now without basically losing everything and becoming a man out of time. But their relationship, Cap and Peggy, is one of the best relationships in the MCU. It works really well. They somehow find a way to pull it off, and because they take their time with it. You can tell that at first they definitely have a little affection for each other, but it takes a while because Steve doesn't know what he's doing. He's focused on a lot of other things. Peggy's very busy, and they slowly work their way up there to being basically, I wouldn't say in love with each other, but definitely liking each other, and there being some chemistry there. And by the end of the movie, when they do have that kiss that they have, it works because you feel like it's earned and you feel like they built up to it. Can't say the same about a certain relationship in the movie that came before this. Now, this movie is definitely a period piece, and to me, those can be hit or miss. I'm not a huge period piece person. Some of them can really work, but some of them don't. This one, I think, worked very well for the World War II kind of era that it put us in. I think it really made us believe that this was actually taking place in that time. They did a really good job with just kind of the way everything looked and the way people acted. It made us feel like we were kind of in this world, and it made us feel like this was actually happening during World War II, and it's something that actually happened in that time. This movie has a ton of heart, especially when it comes to the main character, Captain America, like I said before, always trying to do the right thing. But you got these scenes with him that just, man, they really hit you, especially that end scene where he has to drive the plane into the water because he has no other choice. And he's talking to Peggy, and they're talking about dancing, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to teach you how to dance." And he's like, I might be a little late. We might have to move it up." And she's like, "Okay, how about next Saturday?" They know it's not gonna happen. They assume that Cap is gonna die, which doesn't happen. He gets frozen for 70 years, but they don't think that's gonna happen. And obviously, when he comes out, Peggy's really old, and it's too late for them. This moment just hits so hard because they were just starting to figure out what they were. They were just starting to get along, just starting to build a relationship. And now it has to end because Cap has to be the hero, which is his main character trait. And you understand why he's doing it. And you know that he has to do it. And Peggy knows that he has to do it. But they enjoy their last seconds together. And goddamn, that hurts because, like I said, one of the best couples in the MCU. And it really sucks that they couldn't continue it on, but I understand why they did it for a storytelling standpoint. This movie also has some pretty cool action scenes. When it's not montaging, when I'll get to in a second, but when you actually see Cap fighting these Nazis and kicking the shit out of them, it really gets you hyped. This is a movie that you watch and you're like, yes, when he's kicking the shit out of these guys, and it's just really cool to see that. Even though he's an overpowered dude who can't lose, it's still awesome to see him just absolutely kicking these guys' asses and knowing there's nothing they can do and they're really bad guys, and it's really, really satisfying to see him do that, especially for a guy who is as good as he has, who's went through the issues that he has when it comes to the being too small thing. And then when he did get put in the army, he becomes this kind of poster boy for the army, and he's kind of a piece of propaganda. And you're like, oh man, now they're doing this to him. Can this guy catch a break? Finally gets into the action. Finally gets to kick some ass. And when that happens, it feels so good. I also have to mention this little scene, which is just fucking awesome. With Tommy Lee Jones, the Colonel, interrogating Toby Jones's Zola, which I'll get to his character in a second, but he's interrogating him and he's like, "You want to eat this steak?" And he's like, "No, I don't eat meat." And so the Colonel starts eating it. Tommy Lee Jones starts eating it because he can't go to waste, right? And I don't know what exactly it is about this scene. Maybe it's just because Tommy Lee Jones is such a badass, but just the way he talks to him while he's eating his steak, and it's not annoying at all. It just works perfectly for the character and for the actor. Like, this is awesome. I wish, I wish we would have gotten a little more of this awesomeness in the movie. It's very corny. A lot of this movie is corny, but it works so well because of the time it takes place in and the type of movie that it is. Now let me talk about the villains. The villains are a little bit mixed to me, and here's why. You got the main villain, who is Johann Schmidt, otherwise known as Red Skull, played by Hugo Weaving, and the character himself is very cliche. He's this evil Nazi guy who wants to have power and take over the world and kill a bunch of people. But somehow he's intriguing and kind of charismatic and works because Hugo Weaving does such a good job of portraying him. This dude, I mean, he's Agent Smith from The Matrix. He's V and V for Vendetta. He might be actually the best actor in this movie. And he plays the character of Red Skull so well that even though you know the dude is cliche and you know that he's got no character traits other than he's evil and wants to kill everyone and have power, you're still drawn to him because the portrayal is so good. Then you got the side villain, which is Dr. Zola, kind of the scientist guy who's helping out Schmidt. And the only issue I have with him is we didn't get enough of him, I don't think. We didn't really get to learn much about this character and who he is. But part of that mystery about him is also what makes him kind of intriguing, and spoilers, we do learn a little bit more about him in the next Captain America movie, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So on to the negatives. The first one that comes to mind for me is Steve Rogers, for about the first quarter of the movie, is this really skinny, sickly, short, small guy, and I have to say, it looks really, really weird, because Chris Evans is still playing him. It's Chris Evans' face, but his face is smushed in, and he's on a body that you know isn't his, because you know what Chris Evans looks like. He's on this basically skeleton body, and it looks very bizarre, especially because this was about 7 or 8 years ago when they hadn't quite figured out human CGI yet and how to make someone that isn't completely human look like one. So while you're watching this for about that first quarter-ish of the movie, I'm kind of taking the shot in the dark there, but it really stands out to you, and it looks so weird that you can't get it out of your head, and it's so distracting. Like, I don't know about this. I kind of just want him to get to the normal Captain America. Another thing is probably the main negative that most people bring up about this movie, and that's the montage. This basically took me right out of the movie. It's a montage of him fighting Nazis, and you're like, what are you trying to do with this? I don't really understand. It stops the movie right in its tracks because it fucks with the pacing and it fucks with the story, and you're just like, why can't you just show some of these action scenes actually happening, or just skip them altogether, or maybe show one of them? But the way they did it with this montage just did not land at all for me. Now, while I said the actual setting of this movie is unique because it takes place in World War II and it's a period piece, the story is quite familiar, quite cliched. It is very much a cliche, familiar superhero origin story where a guy discovers new powers, figures out how to use them, kicks a bunch of ass, kicks the main bad guy's ass, and wins in the end. Very predictable, very corny, and it's definitely, you can sense that this is something that has definitely been done before when it comes to the actual story beats. And for that reason, it just makes this movie a little bit forgettable. Another thing is the whole Bucky storyline was kind of odd to me because he's barely in the movie. He's at the beginning, it's established that they're best friends. He disappears for most of the movie. Cap rescues him, get a couple more minutes of him. They go on a mission, and then he supposedly dies. Spoilers for the next Captain America movie. He doesn't actually die. But to me, this felt too quick. And when we eventually find out what happened to Bucky in Winter Soldier, that moment doesn't feel earned because you don't feel like they gave us enough of their character interactions. You understand that Cap cares about people and he cares a lot about Bucky, but we barely got any of them interacting in this movie aside from a little bit in the beginning and a little bit after he rescues him and then all of a sudden he's gone. It's like, I wish they could have done a better job just showing us their friendship so that when that moment happens, both in this movie when he dies and in the Winter Soldier when that moment happens, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It will feel like it was more earned and it'll work better for the audience. Now, my final negative, and this one also feels a bit weird because this is another one that gets a bit retconned in a newer movie, but it's Red Skull's ending. He just goes out so quickly. He's been this badass, intimidating figure throughout the movie. He's fighting Captain America, which is a decent fight. And then all of a sudden he grabs the Tesseract and it shoots him out into the stars, and all of a sudden it's over. Like, ooh, that was a bit anticlimactic for me, and that's something that the MCU struggled with a little bit early on in their franchise, sticking the landing in the third act with the final battles and knowing how to end the villains on a good note. So overall, this is a movie that is a lot of fun. It has some great action, some great character interactions, a great cast, a very relatable main character who you really feel for, an awesome setting in World War II, and it really makes you feel like you're in this world, and a movie with a lot of heart. But some of the issues definitely stand out, like the montage, like the familiar superhero origin story plot beats, like Red Skull's abrupt ending, like Bucky's underdeveloped character and how they went with that, and like the whole look of Steve Rogers in the first quarter of this movie. So I'm going to give Captain America, the First Avenger, a 6.5 out of 10. So there you have it, guys. Have you seen Captain America, the First Avenger? If so, what do you think? Please leave a comment below. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you get notified when I post a video. If you enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up button and stick around, and I will see you soon.